Crypto for the rest of us and Crypto Talk. And stay tuned because Brianna and I have got some good stuff today. And Brianna's a little under the weather. We'll see if she can, rally, which I think she can. And so stay tuned. We're going to give a few minutes for people to jump on here. All right. Welcome back. So we are here for our first inaugural live presentation of Crypto Talk with Brianna and Scott. And I'm J. Scott McMillan, and I have a little YouTube channel called Crypto for the Rest of Us. And my beautiful co-host, go ahead, Brianna.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad you are all here today, and I'm excited to be live. So I have a YouTube channel called Purified People, and within my channel, I talk about all of the areas of our lives, breaking down the areas of our lives, and coming up with simplified ways to purify those life categories. Now that's where our financial life comes in, and that is where crypto comes in. And I have been invested in crypto. I began back in 2015 very briefly in Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then once again, I re-entered into the trading game, into investing just over a year and a half ago. And it wasn't, I'll be honest, when I first began, this last time, I was going in pretty blindly, just trading, investing from Coinbase. I didn't know what anything meant, so that might sound familiar if you're anything like me. But it wasn't until the beginning of this year, so the beginning of 2022, that I started to see terms that I was not familiar with, terms like DeFi and NFTs. And that is when I decided that I did not want to be left in the dust again. And I enrolled in a DeFi course, London Reals DeFi Academy, and that is where I met Scott. So Scott and I have been diving deep into all things crypto, NFTs, metaverse, security, and everything in between. And we have been a part of an incredible community through London Reals DeFi Academy. And so now I have launched my YouTube channel. It's relatively new. I do talk about crypto and DeFi there. And now Scott and I have our crypto talk. It's super exciting. It's been a lot of fun. And so we've been doing that for a couple of weeks, where we share our enthusiasm, our passion for crypto. And also we both are here to learn and educate, and just share the urgency of understanding all of this as well, in a fun way, because we want to enjoy our freedoms as we talk about it. And so, yeah, that's me kind of in a nutshell right now. And yeah, I'll send it back to you, Scott.
Alrighty. Yeah, it's all crypto all day, all night. Not really, but we like to say that. I'm definitely living the crypto life big time. And what I'm finding, though, is it has really opened my eyes to all finances. And, you know, in the past, I've lived through a couple recessions and some definite downturns and some market crashes before. But this is the first time that I've really paid attention. Now, that might have something to do with my age. You know, I got to pay attention to this stuff. Don't have quite as many years left on the planet as I did probably some of those last times, which really does inform, you know, how I think about my finances, think about markets, because it was always, oh, I've got plenty of time. I've got plenty of time. So that changes a lot of things for me. And I think there are a lot of people out there that may be the same. It doesn't matter what age you are, but Brianna, I've really been focusing on the markets. And actually, I've been watching a lot and reading a lot of just market news, stock market, economy, inflation, world sort of economy stuff. And it's eye-opening, but I find it so fascinating that all of this started for me from my interest in crypto. And as you and I talk about a lot, is we're in this for more than just the money, for more than just investing. When you get the crypto bug, when you really get it, you realize that it's way more about that. It's more than that. And that crypto, blockchain, Web3, the metaverse, all of it is the future. And the great part about it, and I know you're really passionate about this, and maybe you can just riff on it a little bit, is really how you're focused on having freedom in your life, in all areas of your life, taking ownership of your life and your freedoms and what you can do and what you can't do, and crypto being one of them. But I mean, on your channel, you talk a lot about, you know, your channel Purified People, a lot about just what it's like to just live in this world right now. And you do a great job of comparing how some of the crypto concepts relate back to life. And I love that. If you want to just comment a little bit more on that concept.
Yes, I do. I didn't understand. Let me just point out too, I did not understand what crypto was about. I know I mentioned that before. It does tie into what I've always been interested in, what my passion has been. I've been very much into health and personal development for over the last 10 years, about the last 13 years, and just really diving deep into the corruption that lies within certain systems. And I didn't even relate that along with crypto. I didn't relate that at all. Finance has never been an area that I've cared about. It's actually been the least one of, I go into life categories in my channel, and it's been the least one that I've ever tapped into until the last year and a half or so. And that is where I discovered crypto. And I discovered it at just the right time, because once you start to really dive in and do the research, everything kind of ties together within our health, within personal development, within wealth and success. And they all go hand in hand. So it was kind of the final piece of the puzzle that I needed. One thing that I like to do, and I don't know if anybody else does this, but I relate the crypto charts and the stock charts. I'm not much of a stock person, but if most people are familiar with what that looks like, I relate those upward trends to our life decisions. And the goal for me is to be a blue chip. It's to be the Bitcoin. And I want to be on that accelerated path to my personal wealth and what that means to me. And so I want to be on that upward trend. And that is why within my channel, I break down those different areas to be able to understand what is hindering myself and ourselves as I share, and try to create growth in every area, and create that upward trend, just like the crypto charts. And going further, into habits and all of those things, I kind of evaluate my growth personally as an individual every day and see if I'm moving up or down. And when it comes to money, it's really important for many people. And so that can be kind of a driving factor for many to see that chart and relate that to their life, and just kind of understand that we will reach those greatest heights if we have a well-balanced life, and they will all kind of work hand in hand. And so that's kind of Purified People encompassed in one, and how I relate that to crypto. And I know that, Scott, you have a history in personal development as well. That's one reason that we work so well together, even though we are so different in many of our things. Scott, you're really good at investigating and diving really, really deep into these specific areas and categories, which I appreciate so much. So I'm curious, I'm excited to know what it is that you're bringing today. We like to go over different articles and just kind of different things we've been looking into over the week. So I'm always interested to hear what Scott has to say.
Thank you.
I know he has some things up his sleeve. So
yeah, my sleeve. Yeah. Well, we're gonna bring out a couple of articles, and these are basically just crypto news articles that we each individually noticed, and they inform kind of the things that we're both personally interested in, because there's just so much news out there. I mean, I'm just so inundated. I've got so many newsletters, so many websites. It's almost daunting, and I have been paring down. But I do. There's certain articles that catch my eye because it's things that I'm really interested in. Because the other thing about crypto is it's very wide, and I break it down into you've got coin investing, and that's where I think most people land. It's sort of like they want to invest in a certain coin and hope it goes up over time. That is where I think most people come in. Then, of course, we've got NFTs. That's a big area that is caught a lot of people's attention, and it's fun and interesting and ever changing. And so there's that. Then you've got Web3, the metaverse, which I think NFTs, the metaverse, you've got Web3, all these things. That's a whole nother world that you could focus on. There's DeFi, which is a fascinating area that is basically trying to create the traditional financial world on the blockchain in the decentralized world. That can go deep. I actually am spending a lot of my time in DeFi, particularly learning the ins and outs of that, and trying to help people understand how you can go. You don't have to stay in the traditional finance, where if you want to save some money in a bank, you're going to earn 0.05% or less than 1% for sure. In the DeFi world, you can earn much higher returns, but there's it's brand new, so it's just a baby. So there's little twists and turns in there you got to be careful of. So I'm really diving deep into there to find out what those twists and turns are. That being said, so the articles that we kind of come up with, we always kind of find it fun to see if we're going to come up with the same article, because we do have similar tastes in personal development and just general views on life, and sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So we'll see what happens today. So. So Brianna, why don't you go ahead and start and bring up your first article. Actually, I don't know if we got you to share your screen here. I'm going to go ahead and click into your page, and I think if you share your screen, it should come up here.
Okay, let me know when you can see my article.
Oh yeah, I have to assign it. How do I do that? I can do that. Let's see. We want to do picture in picture. So your picture pops up. Good, good. Okay, we're good. You want to scroll up a little. Well, let's see what that has the headline. I don't know if you can see that, what it's showing.
Okay, I'm going to actually, I typically just have it on the picture and stay there while I read. But this article, every word is important. I'm going to share it all. I'll walk through it. And this article is titled Dutch Farmers Prepare to Fight Government Overreach by Gaining Financial Freedom with Bitcoin. And this one I'm sharing for those of you who haven't understood that financial freedom does come along with Bitcoin. That's one reason I'd like to share this today. Another reason is I come from a multi-generational family of farmers. And so this one just hits home. Because just hearing, I mean, it's been going on for a while now with these farms that have been told they need to basically shut down. And I just wanted to point this out because we're kind of reaching a point here in multiple areas of the world. So I'll go ahead and just kind of read through this. So it's week 4 of the Dutch farmers uprising in the Netherlands, and there is no sign of a resolution as farmers refuse to give up their farms and the government refuses to back down on regulations requiring farmers to reduce their nitrogen beyond the point that they can continue farming. That's a key point right there. So inspired by the Canadian freedom truckers, the farmers from Italy and Germany around the world are also rebelling against government overreach and supporting the Dutch populist movement to take back their rights. I don't know if anybody has seen any videos on this. I've been kind of looking into videos and images, and we have a lot of people backing this here and protesting. So the Dutch government issued a plan in June laying out nitrogen emission reductions, largely targeting the country's agriculture industry, saying, "There is not a future for all farmers." So it comes to me as in the midst of food shortages and crises, now we are closing down our farms. Next sentence, calling it an unavoidable transition, the government mandated reduction in emissions of up to 70% in many areas close to protected land and as high as 95% in other areas. This plan in practice means that in certain areas, farmers have to reduce their nitrogen emissions by 70%. That means they simply have to quit. So the regulations that are put in place are making it so they just simply can't even continue on, due to what their reasons are behind that. And this is where Bitcoin comes in. So Bitcoin interest is up as fear of government overreach is growing. So what does this mean for Bitcoin? According to a Dutch educator and entrepreneur, interest in Bitcoin is growing, and the most important single hook, what makes people's eyes light up, is the idea that Bitcoin is money out of the reach of the government. For all the talk about asset versus currency speculation, inflation hedges, the only argument that resonates with farmers is that it is money that is their own. In an interview with Bitcoin Magazine on Twitter Spaces, Boris van de Ven, excuse me if I'm saying this wrong, CEO of Blamo Media, told us that the government has been confiscating land and bringing in new regulations, making it almost impossible for farmers to keep farming. De Ven said that the story of the Canadian truckers has played to large audiences here and is causing a level of anxiety that is causing farmers to realize they have got to secure their finances out of the reach of the government. I was surprised by the farmers that I've talked to. The most of them have heard of it, talking about Bitcoin, and are aware of it. They are very much aware of the problems they are facing, he said, and farmers are financially savvy and understand the solution that Bitcoin brings. De Ven is the host of the first Bitcoin podcast supported by the mainstream media company BNB News Radio. And he says that he has been seeing an increase in interest in Bitcoin and a growing number of podcasts and meetups in the Netherlands. And he also hosts a meetup that has been growing exponentially. If the government starts freezing bank accounts, he says, then Bitcoin will be here immediately. And then we go into CBDCs, which I have been really diving deep into, specifically in the last week, but kind of over the last month, I've been just researching. But within the last week, I've been diving really far into these. And CBDCs are central bank digital currencies. and they are coming to most countries, most major countries, stating here that the European Central Bank is developing a CBDC for the euro, saying that a digital currency will speed up transactions, help lower interest rates, and reduce the use of cash, calling it a potential totalitarian nightmare. Deven estimates that the digital euro will be introduced in the next couple of years and notes that the ECB's consultation process produced mostly negative reactions from the general public. Deven sees this as another pressure point for farmers who are increasingly understanding that they may need a way to transact outside of the reach of the government. And once the regulatory trap is in place, both with the CBDCs and with KYC, for those of you who don't know, stands for Know Your Customer. And that's where you give them all of your information of who you are, your identity. So once those KYC regulations for exchanges come in, then there is no going back. So then even further, this is a great article. It's really going into what I've been going into. So I was really glad when I saw this. So the World Economic Forum, WEF, is gaining control. For anybody who's following this at all, I've been following it. And what Deven says is he sees a great centralization happening with his own government, willingly handing over power to the EU and WEF. It's so obvious, the overwhelming influence of the WEF, he says. And he noted that the Dutch royal family is involved with WEF. The Dutch city government are readily handling power over to the EU and its WEF backers. And so in conclusion, I know that's a lot to digest, but in conclusion, Dutch farmers are being squeezed on several fronts, with government taxes increasing, the cost of green technologies due, and the fear of having their land confiscated. Deven says farmers are weary of government control and have been terrorized by government regulations. Farmers are also facing the introduction of CBDCs. The farmers totally get that the government is the enemy and they have to act now to escape complete capitulation. Dutch farmers have called on the world's blue-collar workers to come together for a day of international demonstrations against radical climate policies on July 23rd. So that's tomorrow. Meanwhile, in Amsterdam, Bitcoin businesses are thriving, and Bitcoin is no longer a gimmick, but a means of exchange, says Deven. He said he is scheduled to speak at the Bitcoin Amsterdam October 18th through the 20th, and hopefully bringing continued Bitcoin adoption to Europe. Wow. That's a big one. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Scott?
Yeah, that's. I mean, it was a good article, and it pretty much sums up everything. I mean, there's some strong words in there, you know, that the government is the enemy kind of stuff. But, you know, I certainly get it. And CBDCs will just allow governments that want to over control another tool to do that. And in fact, yeah, I think that the crypto community really needs to wake up to CBDCs and you know, start getting active somehow. And I've never really been much of an activist, but this is something I could really get behind, because it is so easy for them to control so much if we all go to this. Now, I don't know how long it would take for, like, especially, you know, US to fully adopt that. It would have to take many years, I think, before they could phase out cash completely. But the governments are going to roll these out and paint a real rosy picture of what they are. And that's what we need to do, is educate people that this is not crypto. This is the antithesis of crypto in lots of ways. The only thing that might resemble it is it's digital, but it is not the same. So yeah, the CBDC, of all of that, I mean, I know that was almost a small part of the article, but to me, that's where the real scary part comes across the world. And yeah, so that's my 2 cents on that. But that's a good article. That's a good article.
It is, and it was on Bitcoin Magazine. If anybody wants to go see it, they won't find it there. It has since been deleted. That was a couple of days ago. However, I found an article that was almost identical, if not the exact, on the NASDAQ. And so it can be found there. And I thought that was interesting that it was gone. I'm not sure why that is, but it was on there was very similar information on other news platforms. So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm going to do an article too on some regulation, and let me go ahead and pop into that one right now. Just we can kind of stay on that topic a little bit. Let me pop over here. All right, let me see if I can bring this up here. I want to get it bigger. How can it be bigger? Hold on. Okay. Okay, you can see that?
Yep, I can see it. Yeah. I can see the article. I cannot see you, but I can see the article.
Oh, that's fine. Actually, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to get that fixed so I can get my pretty smile on here. No, just kidding. So, yeah, continuing with a little bit of regulation, because I think it is an issue. I mean, we want to stay positive, and I always want to wrap everything that we say necessarily. I want to wrap it in positivity for sure. And I think it's just paying attention, to these regulations that come out, and just making sure that they don't go overboard. Just letting our representatives know how we feel, and that we're all for regulation and for the governments to be involved in this. I think for this to work, for crypto to work, we're all going to have to work together. So this was interesting. The Justice Department just yesterday, and I think it just came out a couple days ago, announced the arrest of 3 people in relation to insider trading on privileged information that belonged to Coinbase, the leading crypto exchange in the U.S. Did you hear about this, Brianna?
I have not heard about this. Nope.
Yeah, this is interesting. So what does that mean? Well, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission brought a civil suit against these 3 people for insider trading of unregistered securities. When I read that, I'm like, what? Because as far as I knew, there was no legislation, there was no regulation necessarily on crypto yet about what is or is not a registered security. So I'm like, what? So this is quite interesting. It's like 9 cryptocurrencies were named as securities in the SEC's case out of 25 that the Justice and the SEC said were traded using privileged information. Okay, that's interesting. That opens up an interesting can of worms about this whole thing about it being securities or not. We know in the stock market world that happens all the time, that insider trading is, not a good thing, that the SEC, is trying to look out for that. And we all as consumers are grateful that happens. We don't want to get ripped off, by these insiders. But crypto's just been a different, beast. And so there are no real rules in there. So all of a sudden, boom, the SEC sues these 3 people or whatever, and then calls 9 of the cryptocurrencies securities. I'm not saying that they shouldn't necessarily be securities or considered securities, but I didn't think that had been decided. So it says also what is or isn't a security as opposed to a commodity. And that's the big issue out here right now is what is a commodity? What's a security? People are saying that Bitcoin is probably a commodity, and maybe all the rest of the altcoins are going to be securities. And I was going to pull up the definition. There's a thing called the Howey test that basically is what the SEC or the government uses to determine in the stock market, in the traditional financial world, what is a security and isn't. And they're now trying to apply that here. And I don't know necessarily how far that they've gotten, but it says securities have an onerous rules around them, who can own them, who can trade them, and such that they would be of little use to startup products. So, again, if that is going to be one of the issues, if all these other coins are securities, you no longer can somebody just copy a blockchain code and create their own project, tokenize a token, and now they've got a crypto token or currency and start a project. And that will stifle, that will stifle, these new companies starting up. But, so I'm not saying that we shouldn't have some regulation in that, because there were a lot of scams of people just throwing together some tokens and pushing them up and then doing a rug pull and leaving. So again, regulations are good, but I think the cart's before the horse here. It says blockchain startups would prefer a way to go to market that didn't amount to saying YOLO, I didn't even know, what's YOLO? Launching and waiting to see if they get sued. Because right now, that's kind of the thing. If these guys got sued, if anybody starts a new company with a new token or a new cryptocurrency, there is no definitive laws on the book. So people don't know. And this is the frustrating part. Apparently, let me read on here. It's not like crypto companies aren't asking for permission. They just aren't getting the thumbs up or down. And this is the thing. For many years now, or at least a couple years, the crypto companies want direction on what is legal and what isn't legal. But, there are no regulations. The regulators are researching and figuring it out, which is good, because I don't think they really understand this space that well. But it leaves people in kind of a lurch, and so to all of a sudden, boom, for these people to get sued is kind of interesting. So So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that is interesting, and it seems like a long distant memory when the securities commodities issue was I kept seeing it everywhere, but I never heard the results like you were saying. And then again, like you pointed out, we have people who have copied the code and then they promote their coin, and some of them have been successful, and then they rug pull everybody and they end up making their money and going and just kind of dropping off the face of the earth. So that makes sense, and that's why regulations are important. One reason why they are important. But it is interesting how, I wonder, so does it say, I don't know, maybe you mentioned it, did it say who sued them in the
SEC?
Okay, so they did sue them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
The SEC sued them.
That's really interesting, because I have not heard of that before. But
yeah.
This has been going on for a long time. It's been going on for a long time, where people have been kind of getting away with this, with these rug pulls. And like you said, there's no laws on that. There's no regulation. It's all kind of gray area at the time. So yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, I don't know I'm just kind of curious, do you have any sort of kind of time frame in your mind before you can kind of predict when these regulations will really be put into place? Do you think it'll be by the end of the year? Do you think that we'll be kind of going through this with trial and error?
Yeah, I think we will be going through trial and error for years, but the question is, when will some of them start rolling out? And what I don't know is, how do they roll out? Can the SEC just generate the law and then, because they've already sued, so it was a civil suit. It doesn't mean that these guys will be found guilty, but what happens next? Do they go to trial? How? So this is interesting, because this particular law of what is a security and isn't is already standardized in the stock world. And so they can take that. They're trying to take that law that's already kind of packaged up and just plop it into crypto. And that's probably what they'll do here. And then it'll come out, because the XRP and Ripple thing is going through the same thing, basically. So there's that has been a coin that's been out for a long time, and the SEC has sued them, and that's the same thing. So this is sort of another part of that. So and that isn't solved either. It's been going on for at least a year, if not more. That Ripple XRP lawsuit. So it's the same kind of thing. So there's that. You've got the SEC and you've got the Commodities Exchange Commission. They're the overseers. The question is, does Congress have to pass the laws first, and are they just the overseers? So I'm a little fuzzy on that. Although I do think Congress also is going to be passing laws. That will probably take a lot longer. I don't think that by the end of the year we'll have anything. No, I don't. But we're getting these little things where it doesn't prohibit these lawsuits happening here and there. And a lot of it is just, it's open air. So, yeah, I like to keep my eye on that too a little bit, just because, I'm just concerned, of the overstepping, and yet I want some form of it. So we'll see how that goes. So, what was your other article about? Do you want to go into it?
Sure, I'll go into my other article. It's just a quick one, and
okay.
Let me get over to it here. So one reason I chose this next one is because I actually was just camping on an island, and it was so nice. And it just felt like it was lawless out there, because it was just an island in the middle of a lake here in North Idaho. And it just felt so freeing to be somewhere that didn't have, or I felt pretty just on the outskirts of everything else. And that is kind of what is relative to this story. And this is considered a free city, and I'm not going to say it right. Prospera is what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, let's go with that.
It's an island city, and they want Bitcoin to be the standard. And so Prospera, like I said, is a small island city located in the Western Caribbean off of the coast of Honduras, who announced that they have adopted the Bitcoin standard. As this island was unknown, there was confusion as many watched, but what the goal is here with Prospera is that they are trying to show the world what it means to exist semi-autonomously from nation-state control while still being part of a nation-state. Prospera entered into a charter agreement 50 years ago, guaranteeing the autonomy of government for its residents. This agreement allows for residents to make their own civil law, regulatory agencies and oversight committees, and largely act as an independent jurisdiction with its own taxation under a select few restrictions. So now what is happening, as the president sat down with Bitcoin magazine for an interview, he referred to Prospera as a free city that has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. The president also mentioned that the city isn't just about Bitcoin, but it is about freedom. And so I'm interested to see how this all plays out. This article, it was found on Bitcoin magazine, if anybody wants to look further into that. It points out more how they're going to do this when it comes to taxes and all of that. But I find it really interesting, and I would like to see how it plays out. And Scott's kind of the ranter of the group, but I'm more of the dreamer, and I like to dream about just how peaceful the world could be, and things that are a little bit unrealistic. But I like this because I like the thought of having smaller, more decentralized areas versus one or small control, where the power and control is in a few hands. I prefer it to have in multiple hands, and where there are places like this, like Prospera, where they are just doing it for themselves. And if I had all the money in the world, I would find a way to get in there. But anyways, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. It does say that there are many differences in how they're going to do this than how El Salvador did it. I don't think, from what I saw, that El Salvador has been very successful. And I've only seen headlines, so I shouldn't even say that without really knowing. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out for them. And it's super exciting, and just seeing how it will play out on a small scale, to have that just be their currency.
Well, that is, you little dreamer, you. That's good. We need more dreamers like you. And I'm glad. Although I'm starting to wonder if you might be a little bit of a Bitcoin maxi here. 2 articles from Bitcoin magazine. You're doing a lot of this sort of privately, don't mess with my stuff. I want to be on my own island. What do we got? And you live in Idaho. Well, I'm from Montana, so I get it. We pry our gun from our dead fingers or what. Yeah. I'm not quite like that, but yeah.
We know the type, though, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
as far as Bitcoin goes, I have, it's just the OG. It's the OG. It's kind of just there, and it just feels like the most, it's just kind of the home when it comes to all of this. And it just seems kind of the most untouchable. It might not
Yeah.
have, it might not go as far as some of these altcoins in the future, but it's shown to really prove itself. And I don't know, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I'm sure a believer in it. I'm not going to say believer even. I'm very enthusiastic about it.
That's a good word. Very enthusiastic about it. Well, cool. I am too. I am too. In fact, let's do a little something here. I want to introduce a new little piece to the show, which is a little bit of education. As some of you might know, I'm creating a course called Crypto for the Rest of Us, and I've been working on some modules. So I thought, we would just introduce a little bit. And we're going to start at the very, very beginning, and we can go deeper into whatever anybody wants. In fact, before I forget, and I have been forgetting that since we are live here, if anybody is on live, please say hello in the chat to us. And if we don't see it here live, we'll see it in the replay. And if you're watching a replay, just type in hashtag replay, or that you watched via the replay. And then let us know what you want to hear about. And if you want a little more education on certain areas, or just certain areas of the news, are you an NFT fan? Are you a DeFi fan? We'd love to know that. So I'm gonna share my screen here, and I'm going to talk about really a very, very open question here, and as what are cryptocurrencies? But really, it's gonna go pretty quickly into Bitcoin, because, well, like you said, Bitcoin is the OG. And here's my notes here. Let's see, get my notes off. Ooh, that was crazy. All right, so yeah, so let me get my window back up there. There we go. So let's talk about this a little bit. So this is going to be in my course. Wish I could get this bigger. I'll have to get this figured out a little bit more. All right. So I'm kind of starting in the middle here, but basically there have been people that were trying to figure out cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, for a long time. And one of the big issues, I guess, that tripped people up was this double spend problem. And the double spend problem was, yeah, if this is a digital currency, why can't you just copy and paste, new coins? And it really took them a long time to figure this out. And so along comes basically blockchain, and really what it was this digital currency digital ledger that they call the blockchain, and it had really been around for quite a while. But then in 2008, during the financial crisis, a person or persons calling themselves Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper in 2009, and it detailed a system for decentralized currency called Bitcoin. That's what they called it. Now this pseudo person has never been announced. They've never come out publicly, so we don't know if it's a person, if it's a group of people, or what. And they hold a significant wallet. They hold a lot of Bitcoin. But so if they were to come forward, there'd be a lot of money waiting for them. But they don't. They're completely anonymous. But we go by Satoshi Nakamoto, and so they really just laid out this whole thing called Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, how it could be used as a digital currency, and basically from that point, we had programmers that just came along because it was open source software and just started creating the Bitcoin network. And so, really, to understand Bitcoin, let's compare it to a bank. So, a bank uses a digital ledger that is stored, but that stores all the transactions, but it's created on their central computer, and everything is on their central computer, and they manage all the transactions. It's not transparent, which means nobody can see really what's going on back there behind closed doors, and they have total control over your money. They can freeze or shut down your account in an instant. There's nothing stopping them. So Bitcoin, on the other hand, is a transparent ledger. And again, Bitcoin is based on the concept of blockchain, but for the most part, we're just going to talk about Bitcoin because Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency built on the first cryptocurrency blockchain network. And we'll see later, we're not going to get to that today, but later, after Bitcoin was created and was up and running, then people said, hey, let's do something different. And then they started creating other cryptocurrencies. And that's why now there's thousands of cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin was the first. As Brianna says, it's the OG. So it uses this transparent network, but it is still pseudonymous, meaning that you can see what wallet address deposited or took out money. You can see where the money is flowing, or the Bitcoin is flowing in the network. Anyone can log in and see this, but you're still sort of hidden from your name. It doesn't attach your name necessarily to it, because it is in a decentralized world where you can still be anonymous on the person, but anyone can see what amounts of Bitcoin and or other cryptocurrencies have transpired. So that'll make a lot of sense later on when you get further into crypto, because like in certain crypto hacks, investigators can go in and see where did that Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency was hacked, where did it go and where did it move? And a lot of times they've caught criminals that have hacked or stolen cryptocurrencies, because it's completely transparent and they can go in and they can see where all of that those assets have moved to. So the cool thing is this is a big network. So no one person, no one company has control over the network. It's all these different nodes independently, and every computer that participates, they keep a copy of the ledger, which is known as the blockchain. So there is no one place that could be taken out. So you can't kill Bitcoin network. You could never take out all the computers, because it's thousands, if not millions, of different computers in the Bitcoin network, and they're all carry a copy of the full ledger. So if one computer goes down, all the other computers have a copy of the ledger. And so it's a very, very robust system that can't be taken down easily. So Bitcoin, of course, is all digital. There's no actual coins involved. There's really just rows and rows of transactions and balances on an online ledger that is kept on thousands of computers all around the world. So when you own a Bitcoin, you really are buying it in fractions of a Bitcoin. So some people say, well, do I have to buy a whole Bitcoin? It's $20,000 or whatever. No, you buy it in little tiny fractions. They go down to 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And those are actually called Satoshis. So if you want to buy a few Satoshis, you can do that with just a couple of dollars. You convert that into Bitcoin. So no matter what the price is per coin, you can buy whatever really denomination that you want. So all of these functions now allow us to have a realistic way that is an alternative to fiat money. That's regular money in the banks, called fiat money. Bitcoin is a form of money that no government or bank can control, which gives you complete control over your money. So as Bitcoin Maxi Brianna, that's what I'll call you now. No, I'm just kidding. So basically, there's no control. No one can control your Bitcoin, right? You are the sole owner of it, and no one can shut you down if that is your currency. So it cuts out a lot of the middlemen, because big banks and all the traditional financial have lots of people that have their hand in the pie, right, of taking little bits. It's why it costs so much in the traditional finance. That's why there's so much overhead, and why they don't give you very much interest right now, because there's so much overhead and so much middleman. In blockchain, it's creating a trustless system where you don't need all the people to hover over and make sure that all the transactions go smoothly. That is really huge. If things were to move completely to the blockchain, all financial transactions in the world, it would eliminate so many people, so many jobs, so much extra collateral that has to be embedded in traditional finance just to make sure that people are doing the right thing, because they've got collateral based on their interests. It would eliminate all that. It has huge implications. Now, that's not the way it is today. That's not how it works. The government is still very entrenched in the old traditional finance. But now we have an alternative to buy Bitcoin and other digital currencies that give us complete ownership of our assets. Now, we still have to convert them back into fiat to do anything with it today, which is fine, because Bitcoin, as we'll talk about a little bit here, isn't really used as a currency. Although that's what Satoshi Nakamoto had in mind, was that it would become a currency that we could just pull out our phones and, pay for, whatever goods and services that we wanted. Right now, because it's still relatively new, that's not quite the case. You really can't buy that much. Now, there are a few companies. Let me see in here. There are a few companies. Click. There we go. This is just a picture showing, that people in a lot of countries don't have access to banks. So what Bitcoin can bring, and is what kind of Brianna was showing in some of her article stuff today, was the control, or to eliminate the control so that nobody could shut you down. But also in America, and we take it for granted because we all have driver's license. We all can go get a bank account. But in these third world countries, they can't get banking. So if you had a fully decentralized blockchain financial security, people could get on and transact very easily, and it would just help out so many of these people that are unbanked. So there are a few places that you can actually use Bitcoin right now. Some of the big ones like Microsoft, Starbucks, AT&T. Starbucks, I think you can get their gift card now with Bitcoin. But really, it's not about that right now. Bitcoin is a little bit too slow. It's just not adopted. But what Bitcoin is right now is a store of value. And it's a very good place to put some money so that, convert money into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's like digital gold. It's going to be around. It is going to rise. It's down right now, but it's going to go up. It was 60,000 a Bitcoin, in the just less than a year ago. It's down now, and it may come up and go down, but eventually over years, it's going to create an asset, because it's such the way that I've sort of described it here in the what it can provide. It's the closest thing to gold, to digital gold that we have. So it is going to be around a while. So I'll end with that, but I will I'll just basically say, let me get this off of here, that when it comes to other cryptocurrencies, so rounding that out, kind of an understanding of what Bitcoin is, how it was created, and why. I think those are really important for everybody that is into crypto to basically understand that. With that general knowledge, then we can start to understand, well, okay, what are all these other cryptocurrencies for? Whatever. Well, they're basically people that decided, that thought, hey, I can make a better Bitcoin, or I can use this blockchain technology to create something new that has the same properties of this blockchain decentralized network. And I'm hoping that it takes over and becomes a really popular technology. So if you were to buy, let's say, what's your favorite layer 2, Brianna? What's your other favorite coin?
Oh gosh, I'm Polygon, Matic.
Let's go with Polygon. So if you think that Polygon is another blockchain type protocol that runs faster. It does things a little bit differently than Bitcoin does, and tries to speed up transactions. Because right now in the Bitcoin network, transactions do take quite a while. And but the cool thing about Bitcoin is that it's never been hacked. It's never gone down. It's been chugging along for 10 years or so or more. Some of these other protocols have been hacked. They have gone down because they're trying new things. So right now, Bitcoin just chugs along, and it's a good place, to put your money long term, like gold. But a lot of people are betting that these other blockchains, these other cryptocurrencies, will eventually get their stuff together and take off and be the next big thing. Maybe they're the next Facebook or the next Netflix. And that's what people are betting on. So when people talk about altcoins, they're talking about other cryptocurrencies that they hope will gain momentum. And they're hoping that, it's just like a stock. If you're investing in Apple, you're hoping that Apple comes out with great new products. So more people buy their products, their stock price goes up, and then you can cash out money, or you can, have a good return. Same thing with other cryptocurrencies. I personally, to kind of end on this, and I personally am just staying with Bitcoin. I am not sure or have a way to evaluate any of these other cryptocurrencies right now. And so I'm just not going to put any money in there. So I am focusing on two areas right now. Putting money in Bitcoin. I dollar cost average every week. I put some money into Bitcoin no matter what the price is. And then I'm also moving into DeFi. So next time I probably will talk about DeFi because I find that the most interesting place in crypto right now. What it's doing is trying to take traditional banking and traditional financial applications and systems and move it into decentralized cryptocurrency, or excuse me, crypto blockchain technology. So there's savings accounts, savings banks, there's places where you can earn yield, there's places where you can borrow and lend money, all in the decentralized world, which doesn't have a lot of overhead, doesn't have a lot of control, which means you can get more yield, you can take advantage of this. They operate really efficient and low cost. So right now, again, it's hard to, how do you save money these days when you can only get 0.5% or a CD with 1 or 2%, or if you have $50,000 or $1 million, maybe you can get 10%, but that's about it. In crypto, in the DeFi world, you don't have to have a penny. You want to invest 5 cents or $5, you can earn 10% on that, 5 to 10%. There are some more complex ones that earn 50, 60, 70%. So that's where I'm spending most of my time is I want to be able to put money into these protocols and have them earn yield. And then I want to, have Bitcoin that I'm just, because in 10 years, it's going to be extremely valuable. So that's where I'm spending most of my time. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. It was just, if anybody has any questions, and they're watching this, let us know if you got any more questions, if you want to know about more altcoins. But I will be going in, probably the next time I do this, we're going to talk about DeFi. We'll really go in there and talk about, what the heck is that and why do I think it's so attractive. So there you go, Brianna. There's a little intro. How'd I do?
That was a great presentation. You laid that out very well, and just in simplistic terms. So that's kind of a glimpse into what's to come with your course. And I always appreciate how well you do on those. You just lay it out in simple terms for people who know a little bit, know nothing, and just kind of know quite a bit. So I appreciate that. And many points that I wanted to touch on with that, but I'll just kind of narrow it down to a few. You talked a little bit about how it cannot be banned. Bitcoin cannot be banned. And it's something that we've seen. China's tried to ban it. I don't even remember how many times. And they've been unsuccessful. It's not possible. We saw it in the war in Ukraine when when people's bank accounts were being frozen, or when there was no access to banks. We saw people sending Bitcoin for relief. And the one that my favorite, because I have to admit, when I first got into this, I thought this was just a means for making money and investing. I didn't put anything together. And what really just lit my fire was in an interview with Andreas Antonopoulos and Brian Rose, our mentor with the London Real Academy. And that was when he pointed out that this provides access to banking for anybody with internet and a smartphone. And I hadn't even realized, I know that just sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I didn't realize up to that point that people didn't have equal access to banking. And now, it's all becoming very clear that this provides so much opportunity. And that is what has lit my fire to really pursue this and spend so much time on it. We're operating in a global world now. We're operating, we have borders between our countries, but we have, I kind of relate myself to civilians in other countries rather than just narrow myself into just one country. I'm kind of that's just the way that I look at it. I feel that I relate to civilians, and, we should all have those equal rights. And this is something that provides that. This is something that removes that control, like you said, that intermediary that we kind of just have accepted as something that had to be there. We didn't really, or I don't know, I guess I didn't ever question why is there a bank, and is there any other way to do this? And every day that our dollar sits in a bank account, we are losing value of that dollar. And so this is a way around that. And like you said, this cuts out so many steps that is involved with traditional finance when we just run a transaction. And that's something to consider with energy consumption as well. But I won't go down that rabbit hole today. But yeah, I loved that.
let me just talk about, let me add that comment about the ban, because that is interesting. 5 years ago, because, so Bitcoin's been around, like I said, for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now. And, up until maybe 5 years ago, definitely 3 years ago, I think it was questionable whether Bitcoin was going to stay around, whether the government was going to shut it down, or the governments, or, because China has tried to do it. And the U.S. government, early on, they weren't happy about this, and I'm not sure they're still happy about it. But about 3 years ago, for sure, Bitcoin proved that it's going to be around. That's when I really got serious about it. I wish I'd invested earlier, but I was just like, I don't know. This is still kind of experimental. But there is so much money in crypto now in different areas. All the big guys are putting money in there right now. Not a lot of it. They're just testing the waters, but they know it's around for real. And we're still at the very beginning, right? The adoption rate is still at the very, very beginning of the adoption curve. So there's all the people really left, to get into it. So that's why getting in now is really good. But you do have to have some patience, because it's not for the faint of the heart, because the systems, the UI, it isn't all figured out yet. And so patience and just sticking with it will pay off if you can do that. And that's one thing I tell people, especially if they don't know about it. They're like, well, it's too, it's crazy. It's like, it doesn't make any sense, and I don't know how to work in the system or whatever, or the UI just is terrible. There's no 800 number. There isn't. That's the thing. In true decentralization, there's nobody controlling it. So, of course, there's no 800 number. Now, there are ways to get help. I mean, there's help desks, and there are the people that create the projects and the protocols, and they do YouTube videos, and, you can talk to different people. So there are ways to do it. It's not like you're left hanging out on a cliff. But, so Bitcoin for sure, and crypto, there's so much upside, and it is really the future. It's yet to be determined how that's all going to work out. But I just encourage, jump in. It's so fun. It's so exciting. There's so many areas that you can just really dive into, and make some money along the way. What a deal.
Right. It is. This is a big point in history. That was another aha moment for me. We are in just incredible times. There's a lot happening. We see a lot of the bad, and of course we all know what that is, but on the other hand, there's this whole other realm here happening, and it is all about innovation and creation, and it's super exciting. You get to learn about things that you've never never discovered before, and it is the future, like Scott just said. And so understanding that we are in these incredible times in history and being a part of that, it feels really good, and it feels good to take ownership over your wealth to an extent, and it just feels good, and taking that responsibility. So I encourage everybody as well, if you haven't yet, just jump in and start learning and get in it, because it's a lot of fun, and there's a great community on the side of it, right?
Yeah, and and the community's great, and there's all different areas. If you want to get way into the Bitcoin maxi stuff, there's communities for that. There's communities for all parts of it. I think both Brianna and I, we just love the whole space, and all things about it. But yeah, I mean, learn more. Visit, my channel, Crypto for the Rest of Us. Visit Brianna's channel, Purified People. My full course going to be called Crypto for the Rest of Us. That's hopefully coming out in the fall. And I'm creating videos like this, and we'll be on live to talk, and we'll have our own community. And it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's exciting, and that's the key thing here. We do keep our eye on regulation and some things, but doesn't mean that we're bummed out about it. Doesn't mean that we're bummed out at all that the crypto market is down now. I mean, everything's on sale. Get in there and buy some now. I mean, it's great, and it's also a great time to learn. So when things get hot and crazy, we're already going to be ahead of the game. So that's my goal. It's like I'm buying stuff on sale. I'm learning as much as I can now, putting small amounts of money in different things so I can learn it, so that when things take off, I'm ready to go. So we're just over a little hour now, so we probably should shut her down. It's a good thing that we start at 6, because I can easily calculate that. We're like 4 minutes over now. We've been going an hour, which Brianna and I know we could talk multiple hours on this, but we'll save some for next week. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. And again, if you're watching the replay of this, post in there what you liked about it, what you'd like to hear about, and just let us know you're watching. And we're just going to go from there. So thanks again, Brianna.
Thank you. And yes, visit both of our channels, Purified People and Crypto for the Rest of Us. And we have some previous videos, and we'll keep going weekly. So you'll be able to find us back again. And yeah, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.